Jose Antonio Vargas was just 12 years old when his mother sent him from the Philippines for a better life with his grandparents in the Bay Area. After graduating from Mountain View High School and San Francisco State University, his journalism career took off, including stints at the Washington Post and the New Yorker. But he kept a secret. He was in this country illegally. In 2011, Vargas disclosed his immigration status in a New York Times Magazine essay. And now in a film that will soon be released in theaters, Vargas chronicles his immigration journey. I spoke with Jose Vargas earlier, but first, a clip from the film Documented.
So it's been a few weeks and I haven't gotten deported. The only thing that's happened so far since coming out is my driver's license got revoked, which is kind of a big deal because it's my only form of government issued ID. So thankfully the Philippine embassy here in New York gave me a Filipino passport. So this is a passport that I can use as a form of ID. The problem is there's no visa in the passport, which means that once I show this to the TSA people at the airport as ID, if they see that there's no visa in it, they can actually call Border Patrol and they can, I guess, detain me. So I guess we'll just see if that happens.
Jose Antonio Vargas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, from that clip, obviously a very personal documentary revealing some very intimate details. Why did you decide to make the film, and what do you hope it will achieve?
Well, first of all, the hope is how do I humanize an incredibly political issue that, that has been played political football with for decades, right? And so the goal of the film is to really make it personal and really make it human. I was just kind of hoping that it wasn't me. Originally, I was going to direct the film, and it was going to be me directing a film on young undocumented people. That's what I was going to do.
Like a journalist.
Like a journalist. That's exactly what I was going to do. And then the film became more personal, and once it went down that route, it was like you're either all in or you don't go in at all. So that's what's happened in the film.
There's a very emotional scene in the film when you see your mom for the first time in nearly 20 years. You haven't been able to travel to the Philippines.
On film. I see her on film.
You see her on film because you haven't had the papers to travel abroad.
Yeah.
And so you've had to see her for the first time via Skype.
Yeah, so she can't come here. She's been denied a tourist visa, and she's actually on a 16-year waiting list to come legally. So that's why she can't come here and I can't leave, because I won't be able to come back. There's no guarantee. So she and I meet on Skype. Which was a very painful, but almost kind of also liberating thing to do, because I mean, how do you explain not seeing your mom for 20 years? Like, I could not have written that as a writer.
How do you think these personal moments will affect the immigration debate?
Look, 1,000 people get deported every day, 2 million people in 5 years. What do? I make a film. What I'm trying to do is, again, humanize the issue and expose the complexity of it and what's really at stake, which are, immigration has always been about families. It's always been about families, not Republican or Democrat, families.
But for many in this country, Jose, it's also about being legal, about having documents.
Absolutely.
Immigration reform is stalled in Congress right now, a very divisive issue. You have attracted a lot of critics. You call yourself undocumented, but to many, you're illegal. You repeatedly broke the law. They think you should be deported.
Yeah. So actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. So to be in this country without papers is actually a civil offense and not a criminal one. So calling me illegal is actually factually inaccurate. So most people don't know that. But more so than that, like, in what other issue in this country is there any other issue in this country in which we refer to a group of people as illegal? This is the only issue, right? So there's that. Of course, I understand that I'm here illegally. And, I'm a student of American history. And sometimes I wonder, like, when the Irish, after the potato famine in the 1850s, came here and crossed the border, that was the Atlantic Ocean and landed on Ellis Island in New York, they didn't have any papers. Did we call them criminals too? Right? So what's the difference? I mean, again, this is a question that I've been asking Americans as I travel around the country, and this is a question that is partly exposed and asked in the film. How do you define American? Is it pieces of papers?
Well, another question people might be asking also is, how are you still in this country? You're several months too old to qualify for President Obama's policy of deferring deportation and offering work authorization to undocumented immigrants who came here as children. How are you still here?
I have no idea. I mean, when I did this, I was, I had talked to like 27 lawyers. So like any reporter, I reported it, right? And then I prepared myself for the worst. I prepared my family for the worst. I was prepared to be deported. What I was not prepared for was silence. And that's mostly what I got from the government. So actually there's a scene in the film, as you know, where I actually call ICE, which used to be INS, myself, and ask them, I haven't heard from you. What are you planning to do with me?
There were some developments on the immigration issue this week. The federal government rejected California's design for driver's licenses to be offered to undocumented immigrants next year. Florida is expected to join 19 other states allowing undocumented immigrants to get in-state college tuition, have those rights. Do you think ultimately this is how immigration reform will happen, state by state, as opposed to at the congressional level?
Well, I mean, I think given the congressional dysfunction and partisanship that we're seeing, it's an election year. It's going to be another presidential election year, right? So I think there is going to be a lot of waiting still to happen. And I do think that states, especially states with huge immigrant populations like California, Texas, New Mexico, Florida, Chicago, Illinois and Chicago, like we need to figure out how are these other states going to actually alleviate, right, the struggles that's happening with all these undocumented immigrants in their own states.
You say you're now shifting your focus from the politics of immigration to the culture of the debate. What do you mean by that?
So I have done about 200 events in 42 states, visited maybe 100 or so colleges in 3 years. And what I can tell you is the conversation on this issue has been stuck in the US-Mexico Latino illegal border conversation. When to me, my job as a writer, as a filmmaker, is how do I unpack that and transcend it and make it about people's stories. So I'm really excited because I'm about, for example, we'll be working with the Writers Guild of America in LA and try to figure out how can we better integrate immigrants, documented and undocumented stories in television and in films. So that's really the goal at Define American, is how do we help people do that? Producers, screenwriters, and directors.
And change the conversation through pop culture.
Pop culture, media, absolutely.
Okay. Jose Antonio Vargas, thank you. Your film, we should say, opens in Bay Area theaters May 16th in San Francisco, Berkeley, and Sebastopol. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.